Hi, this is Boris. Welcome to Movie Messenger. As I did for the movie Van Helsing, I will tell you when I get to the spoiler section. For the moment, this is for people who haven't watched the movie and they want to know more. I would like to also say that I have not watched the original movie, and this is not a comparison of the original versus the remake. Today I'm going to discuss about the movie The Wolfman from 2010, the remake from Universal Studios based on the original motion picture screenplay by Kurt Siodmak. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Just like the writer's story, this movie was a troubled production. Some might even say this movie was cursed. It was shot in 2008 but was not released until 2010. The movie changed directorial hands many times and finally landed on Joe Johnston. He directed Jumanji from 1995, and he will go on to direct Captain America: The First Avenger in 2011, which is a movie part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is not me being an apologist for this movie, but by saying the movie was a troubled project. This is just to set up the background. I will tell you why I found that this movie is underrated in the spoiler section. There's always been a fascination about the relationship between man and the animal kingdom, so much so that it even captures people's imaginations to think about supernatural hybrids of the two. I found a picture from the book Sapiens, written by Yuval Noah Harari, published originally in 2011, which shows what could be the first work of art discovered. A statue of a lion man or a lion woman, with the head of the lion and with a humanoid body. This brings us to the myth of the werewolf. We talked a little about werewolves in the episode about Van Helsing. Of course, there's no historical record of how the myth of the werewolf came to be. But one word appeared again and again when I was doing the reading about this phenomenon, and that is lycanthropy or lycanthropy. It's even mentioned in the movie once by the Doctor. This comes from the legend of King Lycan in the ancient Greek mythology. So the story goes, he's known to have served the meat of a young boy to Zeus, the god of thunder, to test his divinity. Enraged, the god of thunder turned Lycan and his sons into wolves, and that is considered one of the original myths behind the werewolves. In the beginning of the film, the main character Lawrence Talbot, played by Benicio del Toro, comes across a man who offers him a staff with the head of a wolf as the handle. He says he brought the staff at Gévaudan. Actually, the former province of Gévaudan, the modern-day Lozère, a part of Haute-Loire province in France, was associated with mysterious attacks on people, which led to the hysteria of the time and beliefs of supernatural beasts. Most notably, La Bête de Gévaudan, the beast of Gévaudan. A wolf-like creature, according to witnesses. The victims were often killed by having their throats thrown out. So that was an interesting background on myths surrounding the film. The movie is directed by Joe Johnston. As I said, this was his first rated R feature with an incredible cast. Emily Blunt is amazing, of course, as Gwen Conliffe, Benicio del Toro as Lawrence Talbot, Anthony Hopkins as Sir John Talbot, Hugo Weaving as Abeline. Interesting fact about the Inspector Francis Abeline, played by Hugo Weaving, is actually based on Frederick Abeline, a Scotland Yard inspector that investigated London's Jack the Ripper murders in 1888. Joe Johnston has done a great job. The pace in the movie is well controlled. I can't say that it builds to a perfect crescendo, but it never feels rushed. And I always have the impression as an audience member that I am in the hands of a talented filmmaker, which is one of the things I look for in a film. Benicio del Toro signed on to do the film because he's a huge fan of the original film. Each time I rewatch this film, I'm transfixed on his performance in every scene, and he was the perfect choice, and he carries perfectly the film on his shoulders. Emily Blunt is always great in every movie she does, and she's in. She doesn't get a lot of screen time, but portrays the tortured wife with a mysterious past. Actually, in a way, everyone seems to hide something which only complements the mood of the film. How can I talk about the cast and not talk about the great Anthony Hopkins? Anthony Hopkins just makes even the most simple dialogue sound epic. He shows how much he's removed from the rest of the world by the way he talks, the way he walks. He's one of the few actors who can deliver a very toned down performance, but still can show the machines turning inside his head. The other interesting fact is that the practical makeup for the werewolves was done by the iconic Rick Baker. For those who don't know, he won his first Academy Award for his work on An American Werewolf in London in 1981, the film from 1981, and also worked on some of the famous movies which required great makeup effects like Men in Black, The Grinch, Hellboy, to name a few. He based his design off the Wolfman of Jack P. Pierce's design on the original film, and also on Wolves and Apes in books and his old dog Bosco, interestingly. He even has a cameo in the film. Here's the synopsis. So, upon his return to his ancestral homeland, an American man is bitten and subsequently cursed by werewolves. Unlike Van Helsing, this movie is a rated R family drama, which is a perfect choice. So now we go to the spoilers. Now I think it is safe to give you a spoiler warning. Even though I won't discuss the story in detail, I will go into information which might reveal what goes on in the film. So if you haven't watched the movie, I suggest you watch it and listen to the next part if you don't want your viewing experience to be ruined. So in the second part of the film, after Lawrence Talbot gets captured, he's brought back to the Lambeth Asylum, where they conduct experiments on him because they believe that he killed those people due to his madness. Another interesting piece of trivia is Lambeth Asylum, which also appeared in the video game Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Lambeth Asylum actually is a fictional asylum based on an amalgamation of several real-life institutions. It's located, and the experimentation with patients appears to be based on the Bedlam Asylum in London. In my opinion, as I said, this movie is underrated, and here are the things I love about it. First, the casting is fantastic. I love the casting because, like I mentioned, Benicio del Toro, Emily Blunt, and Anthony Hopkins, their performance is hypnotic, and of course it's always a pleasure to see the Agent Smith himself, Hugo Weaving, who speaks with that tone, which I really love, which is really familiar from Matrix. Where he is speaking like, I want to get out of this prison, this reality. So I really love the way he talks. Again, in the episode about Van Helsing, I talked about my theory of the term lunatic. And in this movie, the first time he meets, the character of Abeline meets with the character of Benicio del Toro, he alludes to Jack the Ripper as the killings, as the doing of an animal or a lunatic. So that was a really good, great nod. A lot of people complain about this, but I personally love the practical makeup for the werewolves, especially when I read that Rick Baker was trying to pay tribute to the original design from 1941. Due to the fact that they didn't have time for the practical effects for the transformation, they had to go with CGI, which to be honest looks great in some places and not so great in other scenes, and well, that's the problem with CGI. And I think I also mentioned it in my episode about Van Helsing, is that I just feel like, I don't know, it's maybe they don't give enough budget for the CGI, but usually in these Universal movies the CGI is not very consistent. And especially in this movie, okay, we can, as I said, this was a troubled production, and I think I read that they didn't have the time to go through everything with the practical effects, so they didn't have time to reshoot or the money to reshoot, so they had to add CGI for the transformations and so in some effects and so on. So yeah, but that was I feel it was a missed point. The other point which I really love about this movie is the fact that it's rated R. Gives of course, it gives way for some great killing scenes. Especially my favorite scene is especially the scene where he transforms in the asylum, and when the doctor tries to prove to a crowd of people that Lawrence Talbot is only a madman who thinks he's a werewolf. They get locked inside a closed building, and like a beast version of Lawnmower, he just kills everyone. And also the other one is when he escapes from the asylum and then just goes in London to kill people, and he actually I think he jumps on a bus and then the bus just falls on his side and he breaks through the window inside, and again he's just like a bunch of innocent people trapped in with this monster who just is like slashing away from left to right, and that's just gory and bloody. I think it could have been gorier. I guess I don't know. Maybe they were they maybe cut a maybe less violent, gorier version, less bloody version. But I mean, if they would have pushed it a little bit further, that would be perfectly fine. I mean, if you look at Logan, I mean, which is, I mean, the character of Wolverine has to be violent and has to be, the movie has to be R-rated. So yeah, that was a great point there. Another thing that I like about the movie is that it makes for a great nighttime watch before you go to bed. I don't know, there are some movies like that where I don't know, maybe I can do another episode about this, but I just feel like some movies are well suited for certain occasions. Like, for example, some movies are really great for, I feel like, a rainy Sunday, or like, you know, like a mid-afternoon movies, or like in middle of the night movies and so on. And this one is a great nighttime watch before you go to bed. There are, of course, jump scares, but believe me, I don't watch horror movies at night, but this one is an exception. I love the cinematography, which gives it a kind of Renaissance painting kind of look when it comes to lighting and color. And especially in certain scenes, if you watch it in a dark room, you almost feel like there are no borders, like you don't see the frame of the screen. And I love that. And I think that the lighting is very well placed, and it's really beautifully lighted. And this is why I warned about the spoilers. The other thing I really loved about the movie is the ending. Emily Blunt's character shoots the werewolf and kills Lawrence Talbot, who was bitten by his father, who was the beast who killed Lawrence's brother and his mother. Lawrence also bit Inspector Abeline, who now has to carry the curse, and on a human level the circle of violence continues. And I love that it is a tragic ending, but it is there's no other way in it. Like, and even at the end, when she kills him, he turns and then like the last thing he says is thank you, like, because he's now free from the curse. And this also, of course, makes reference to another point in the film where, which I will talk about later, is the gypsy woman Maleva. She talks about that only a loved one can free him from this curse. So I think that was the point why they were that they made reference to. In my last video, I talked about typical characters. When I compared two remakes of Universal Monster movies, in this one you don't have any of that. All the characters have a defined purpose in the story, and that's a really good point, which I love about the movie. I also find it interesting that they showed the way people dealt with racism, mental illness, and hysteria of supernatural beings in events at the time. The only criticism I have for this film, as I said, is the use of the CGI, which takes you out of the film at some points. Like I said, for example, at the end, Lawrence and his father fight as werewolves. There are some great practical effects, but they used CGI, and I wish the fight scene would have been longer and more bloodier and more gorier. Yeah, but that was just, like I said, they missed that point. Now let's talk about what the movie means, in my opinion. Let's start with the title. It's not werewolf, it's the Wolfman, right? So, of course, since it's based on the movie classic, they had to use the same name, the same title, but I like to think it's about the relationship between the animal that is living inside all of us. So that can be I will talk more in detail about that. The screenwriter of the original movie, Kurt Siodmak, was a person of Jewish descent who was living in Germany. He had to flee Hitler's Third Reich and eventually left Europe. And he described the idea for the film as the story of an outsider whose destiny was cursed by forces he could not control. And in the movie you could feel that feeling of outsider Lawrence Talbot, who comes back to the town Blackmore after a long time. Like, everybody sees him as this cursed madman who was once admitted in an asylum and then became an actor, and then now he came back because he wanted to find out what happened to his brother. The gypsy woman called Maleva, who seems to be a palm reader, talks about fate when Lawrence Talbot goes to investigate about what really happened to his brother. That night, Lawrence gets bitten by the beast while trying to save a boy from the gypsy camp. As Maleva stitches his wound in the scene, a girl tells her not to save his life. So I'm just going to read what I noted from the dialogue, what had happened, the exchange between the young girl who says that not to save Lawrence Talbot, who was bitten by the beast, and Maleva. So the girl says, "Once he is bitten by the beast, there is no cure. You should let him die." And Maleva replies with, "You would make me a sinner." And then the girl says again, "There is no sin in killing a beast." And Maleva says, "Is there not?" And she changes into their language, which I think is Romanian, or Romanian, I guess. What of killing a man? Where does one begin and the other end? And she finishes stitching him by saying he can only be released by someone who loves him. I know writers do this to foreshadow the ending or something that is going to happen later in the film. And in the end, Lawrence gets shot and killed by Gwen, which he loves, and I think she also loves him. And the movie ends with a voiceover from Gwen. It is said there's no so this is the in quote. This is the voiceover that Gwen says at the end. It is said there is no sin in killing a beast, only in killing a man. But where does one begin and the other end? End of quote. And when she's saying this, they show a shot of the burning mansion where Anthony Hopkins' character lived. There's also a monster. There's also a question of was Anthony Hopkins was he the real monster who controlled himself and lived among humans, and Lawrence, his son, was a victim of a cruel fate? Finally, the scene at the end when Lawrence, which has turned into a Wolfman, is face to face with Gwen. He doesn't kill her immediately. It reminded me of the scene between. I'm taking this example because it's the most recent one. The scene between the Hulk and the Black Widow in Avengers: Age of Ultron. Hulk being inspired, of course, the character of Hulk is inspired from myths of transformation like werewolf and, of course, Dr. and Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's just one example. There are other movies with similar scenes, but it made me think what people, I don't know what people are trying to say with those kinds of scenes. Are they making a statement about the role of women who have the ability to tame, quote unquote, the animal instincts inside a man? I don't know, maybe. In conclusion, this is still a gripping movie. A lot has to do with the actors' performances. I know it's not an original movie, but it was good for the studio to have gone for the R-rated version. Hope the points I talked about will give you a somewhat better view about the film, or maybe you were unfamiliar with this film, maybe you'll give it a shot. So I highly encourage to go check it out. So everyone, thanks for joining me in this episode about one of the underrated movies I wanted to give a shout out to. Of course, I will do others that I consider which are underrated. I'm trying to do an episode per week. I hope I won't disappoint. You can find me on Instagram at sketchman_Boris. It's called Sketchman, like SKETCHMAN_BORIS, Sketchman Boris. You can read my monthly webcomic series for free on WEBTOON application or WEBTOON website. It's called Tech, TECH. Until the next time, I can't wait to talk about, I'm going to completely change the genre. I'm going to talk about action movies, and I can't wait to talk about Mission Impossible Fallout, which looks great. I want to go see it in the cinema. And until then, this is Boris, the movie messenger, signing off.